have one foot in one place and another foot in another place, and you can mix cities, countries, planets, whatever you want. Where would you like to have one foot and where would you like to have the other?
The story of Sam Heughan's transformation from mistake to success began not with triumph, but with quiet despair on a mist-soaked morning by the shores of Loch Ean, where the third season of Highland Shadows, a fantasy drama that had captured the hearts of millions, was filming its most crucial sequence. The scene, written as the emotional summit of the entire season, demanded everything of him. The culmination of a tribal war, a confrontation between duty and mercy, a speech that was meant to echo through the history of the show as the moment when his character, the Highland warlord, chose between peace and destruction. The setting was perfect in every cinematic sense. The mist rolling off the water in ribbons of white, the pale orange light of dawn reflected upon the still surface, mountains rising like silent witnesses, and the pine trees standing unmoved as though they, too, were waiting for the verdict of men. Sam was to step onto the cold stone wharf, sword in hand, and deliver a dialogue filled with anger, love, fear, hope, and responsibility. The filmmakers expected him to transform those words into something timeless, a declaration that would define his character and perhaps his career. It was the kind of pressure no actor, however experienced, could escape. The night before the shoot, Sam had practiced endlessly. He had recorded his lines on his phone, listened to them in his sleep, recited them while walking through the corridors of his home, whispered them while brushing his teeth, even murmured them through bites of breakfast. He wanted every tone, every cadence, every pause to feel inevitable, to shift from the trembling hope of peace to the roaring strength of defiance, as though the words had always lived within him. But for all his preparation, the night before was restless. He lay awake long after midnight, the room bathed in the dim glow of a desk lamp, lines running endlessly in his head like a restless tide. He worried not about fame, not about Mon, but about forgetting. Forgetting even a single word would mean retakes, lost light, exhausted crew, and a fracture in the perfection he demanded of himself. His voice cracked as he rehearsed in the silence, a man alone with the ghosts of his own expectations. When morning arrived, the world was a cathedral of silence and mist. The crew began their work before sunrise, adjusting the lights, testing the drone cameras, setting the ambient sound of lapping water. The air was cold enough to sting the skin, the fog thick enough to soften every shape. Sam stepped into costume, his hair slicked back, his sword polished, his heart pounding. He looked at the fog and thought it almost too beautiful to disturb. But when the director called action, something within him froze. The first line, the one he had repeated hundreds of times, slipped from his mind like a stone falling into deep water. His lips parted, but no sound came. For a long, unbearable moment, only the quiet murmur of waves filled the air. The camera kept rolling, the crew held their breath, and the director's voice, low but steady, broke the silence. "Sam, when you're ready." Yet readiness would not return. They stopped the take, and for a few minutes, everyone tried to laugh it off, saying the cold had stiffened their tongues. But when they restarted, the light had shifted. The mist had begun to rise, revealing a harder, colder world. The fog, once ethereal, now felt ordinary. Something irreplaceable had been lost. Sam forced himself to begin again. He delivered the first line, then the next, but the rhythm was gone. The forgotten line had left a shadow in his mind, and every time he spoke, that shadow whispered, "You'll forget again." The words felt heavy, his gestures mechanical. Even the wind seemed to taunt him, brushing his neck, making him shiver, breaking his concentration. Around him, the extras stood quietly, watching the playback, exchanging uncertain glances. The director, patient but weary, rubbed H. Starr, who played the rebel leader, an experienced actor with a calm presence, stepped forward, gently saying, "Take it easy, Sam. We'll find it." But reassurance could not erase the shame that had already taken root. Each time the dialogue reached its climax, where his character was meant to call upon the tribe to rise, his voice lacked the fire it once carried. The emotion was there in spirit, but not in life. It was as if the soul of the speech had been replaced by a carefully memorized imitation. Retake followed retake. The sun rose higher. The drone could no longer fly due to the strengthening wind. The crew adjusted lights again, fighting the shifting fog. Costumes were damp with dew. Makeup began to fade. What was meant to be a morning's shoot bled into afternoon. The energy drained from the set like color from a fading painting. By the time they reached the final attempt, the atmosphere had changed completely. The once golden dawn was now silver and cold. The air carried the faint scent of wet pine and exhaustion. Sam's boots were soaked, his breath visible. He stepped again onto the stone dock, feeling the slippery moss beneath his feet. Each movement felt like a metaphor for his state of mind, trying to find balance, slipping slightly, then recovering just enough to continue. He felt the camera's gaze like judgment, the director's sigh, the rustle of the crew, even the clicking of the slate board. All seemed to echo his inner disarray. He delivered the speech one final time, pushing through the fog of self-doubt, summoning from within whatever embers of emotion remained. When it was done, the director called "cut," but no one cheered. There was only silence. The light had changed beyond repair. The magic of the morning had gone. The crew began to pack up, their movements slow and tired. Sam stood there, staring at the lake, unable to shake the feeling that he had failed. Not merely at acting, but at something deeper, something human. He sat alone by the water as the sun began to set, wrapped in a thick coat, his breath mixing with the mist that lingered just above the surface. He watched the reflection of the fading sky, streaks of amber and violet trembling on the ripples. The world was quiet now, stripped of its cinematic grandeur. He thought of the morning, the anticipation, the hope, and felt a deep ache in his chest. He wondered whether the final cut of the scene, once edited and scored, would convey anything of the truth he had tried to express. The uncertainty, the longing, the burden of leadership, the conflict between pride and compassion. Could the audience sense that his trembling hand on the sword was not part of the performance, but real? That his pause before speaking was not calculated, but the hesitation of a man on the edge of collapse? In that silence by the lake, he began to understand something that years of fame and discipline had obscured, that art, like life, is not built on perfection, but on surrender. That night, he walked alone back to his trailer, exhausted beyond words. His reflection in the mirror looked older, not from age, but from the weight of expectation. He poured himself a cup of tea, sat on the small couch, and replayed the scene in his head, frame by frame. The forgotten lines still haunted him, but in that haunting he saw something almost beautiful. A reminder that failure was not the opposite of artistry, but its rawest form. To falter before the camera, to lose one's rhythm, to tremble in front of others. These were not weaknesses. They were truths. The next morning, when he arrived on set, the director called him aside. There was no reprimand, only quiet understanding. "We'll cut the scene differently," the director said. "The emotion is there, Sam. You don't see it yet, but it's there." Sam nodded, not convinced, but grateful. The show continued, episode after episode, and soon the memory of that day faded into the rhythm of filming. Months later, when the season premiered, that same scene aired almost exactly as it had been filmed. The forgotten line was invisible. The editor had cut around it. The pauses that Sam had thought were failures became moments of haunting stillness. The trembling in his voice, which he had tried so hard to conceal, was interpreted by critics as profound vulnerability. Viewers wrote about how his eyes carried the sadness of a man who has seen too much. Social media buzzed with praise. "Raw," they said. "Real." The director sent him a message. Sometimes the truth comes when you stop acting. For the first time, Sam rewatched the scene not as an actor analyzing his performance, but as a spectator witnessing something honest. He saw himself, sword in hand, standing in the mist, his voice breaking, his breath unsteady, and he saw the beauty in that imperfection. He later admitted in an interview that it was that day by the lake that changed how he approached his craft forever. He stopped chasing control and began embracing uncertainty. He learned that the greatest performances are not about mastery but about allowing oneself to be seen without armor. He began encouraging younger actors on set to fail gloriously, to take risks, to lose themselves, to forget a line if it meant finding a moment of truth. He understood now that the camera loves what is real, not what is rehearsed. In his mind, that morning on Loch Ean had become symbolic, a baptism of failure that had cleansed him of the illusion of perfection. Years later, when Highland Shadows concluded, fans would often ask him which scene had meant the most. He would always smile and say, "The one where I forgot the words." They would laugh, thinking he was joking, but he wasn't, because in that forgotten line lay everything he had learned about the fragility of the human spirit, the humility of creation, and the strange alchemy through which mistakes become meaning. He realized that success was never the absence of error, but the transformation of error into art. The lake scene, once a source of shame, had become his quiet victory, the moment he stopped pretending to be invincible and began to truly act. He would sometimes revisit the filming location when in Scotland, standing by the same cold stones, watching the mist rise, remembering the silence after the failed take. The air there always carried a kind of peace, as if the land itself had forgiven him. And in that forgiveness, he had found what every artist longs for. Not applause, not perfection, but truth.
Who are you?
Oh.
How are you feeling? Oh, that feels nice. I feel nice. And what color are you?
That moment, when Sam realized that he could fail miserably in front of everyone, did not come like thunder but like a soft collapse inside him. The quiet cracking of confidence that only those who care deeply about their craft ever truly experience. He had always believed that discipline and preparation could shield him from humiliation, that control over his voice, his expression, his posture could guarantee safety. But in that instant, when the line slipped from his memory, when silence replaced the carefully rehearsed rhythm of speech, he came face to face with the fragility of being human, of being an artist. He thought about the scene long after the director called cut, his mind spinning with anxious possibilities. Perhaps they would decide to reshoot it, perhaps they would cut that part entirely, perhaps the editor would find it too flat, too unconvincing, perhaps the librarian, the meticulous guardian of continuity, would later comment that the scene lacked emotion, that Sam wasn't himself, that something had gone wrong. He worried that people would whisper that he was slipping, that he was distracted, that fame had dulled his edge. He worried that this one mistake would ripple through his career like a stain that could not be washed out, that this moment of weakness would be something he would one day wish to bury in the quiet corners of his memory. When the shoot ended that day, he moved through the set like a man underwater, detached, polite, saying little to his colleagues who laughed and packed their things with the lightness of people who had done their job well. In the evening, back in his hotel, he stood at the window with a cup of hot tea, watching the city lights flicker like distant thoughts. The warmth of the tea did little to thaw the disappointment that had settled in his chest. He tried not to think about the scene, tried to distract himself with television, with a book, with anything that wasn't the echo of that forgotten line. But when night came, sleep refused to hold him. He woke up in the early hours, heart racing, haunted by a dream that replayed the scene again and again. In the dream, he walked up to the stone pier, surrounded by expectant faces, the camera a silent witness, and when it was time to speak, no words came. The silence stretched, vast and suffocating, until even the waves seemed to stop moving. The terror of that dream lingered in his chest when he awoke, the kind that doesn't vanish with daylight. The next morning, as he sat at the small desk by the window, his laptop chimed with an email. It was from the director, brief but heavy with implication. There were notes about the scene, technical adjustments, emotional observations, but one line stood out: "We need more fire, more faith. The voice must carry through the water." Sam read it aloud softly, his voice low, resigned. He knew what it meant. They weren't satisfied. And yet, he also knew that filmmaking was a creature of chaos, subject to weather, light, the unpredictable moods of nature, and the deeper, quieter storms of human emotion. Even the best-laid plans could fall apart. But what mattered, he realized, was not perfection but awareness, the ability to see one's own flaws, to live through them, and to learn. That painful day, he would later say, became one of the great moons of his career. Luminous not because it was perfect, but because it illuminated his weakness and, through that, his humanity. In the days that followed, he began to work differently. Instead of memorizing his lines mechanically, he began to understand them, to feel them in his bones. He asked himself why his character spoke those words. What fear, what hope, what pain, what courage lay beneath them. He practiced not for precision, but for truth. He went to an older actor he respected, a man with decades of theater in his veins, and asked, "What do you do when you forget a line?" The older man smiled, as if remembering his own forgotten words. "You stop," he said. "Breathe, go back to the last line you remember, and let emotion guide you. Don't think of the words as a cage. Think of them as a river. If you're in the flow, you'll find your way." Those words stayed with Sam. It wasn't about saying the lines perfectly. It was about living the scene so fully that even if he forgot, the truth of the moment would carry him forward. He began to train differently with his co-stars. They didn't just rehearse dialogue. They inhabited the world. He would say, "Let's imagine it's raining. The wind is cutting through our coats, and we've just seen our people under attack. How do we speak then?" They would run the scene not in the safety of a studio, but outdoors in the open air, letting real wind, real sound, and real discomfort shape their performance. Through this, he learned something profound. Authenticity didn't come from control. It came from surrender, from embracing imperfection, from accepting that forgetting, pausing, faltering were not signs of weakness but pathways to something truer. He began to forgive himself. Slowly, gently, he let go of the punishing perfectionism that had defined his early career. He learned to be present, not obsessing over the next take, not fearing criticism, but simply being there, in the heartbeat of the story. When interviews came and people asked about that scene, he did not hide it. He shared it publicly, even laughing sometimes as he described how his mind had gone blank, how the silence had felt eternal. He said, "That scene could have been a disaster. The lighting wasn't right, the lines were broken, the rhythm collapsed. But that's where I learned that audiences don't care about perfection. They care about truth. Sometimes what moves them most is the imperfection. The tremor in your voice, the hesitation before a line, the look of uncertainty in your eyes. That's what makes a character REA." When he later watched the final cut, he noticed the tiny flaws the editor had left untouched. The slight twitch in his eye, the small pause before a crucial line, the uneven breath that shouldn't have been there. And yet, those imperfections made the scene pulse with life. The audience, he realized, connected not despite those flaws but because of them. They felt his vulnerability, sensed that beneath the costume and the accent and the lights, there was a man trying, struggling, surviving. It reminded them of themselves. From then on, Sam developed a strange but beautiful habit. When rehearsing, he would deliberately interrupt his own flow. Forget a line on purpose, pause midway through a sentence, then find his way back. It was an exercise in trust. Trust in his instincts, trust in emotion, trust in imperfection. He practiced outdoors, listening to the world around him. The rustle of leaves, the murmur of the wind, the rhythm of distant footsteps. He tried to weave those sounds into his delivery, as though nature itself were part of his dialogue. He realized that acting wasn't about escaping reality, it was about merging with it. He began sharing these insights with younger actors, telling them, "Don't fear mistakes. Don't fear forgetting. Fear only the moment you stop trying. The scariest thing isn't failure, it's giving up." One young co-star, Alice, once asked him, "Have you ever wanted to quit?" He smiled, tired but honest. "Every time I make a mistake, I want to. Every time I forget a line or lose a moment, I think, maybe I'm not good enough. But then I ask myself, if I quit this time, what happens next time? If I give up after one failure, I'll never learn what's beyond it." Through this philosophy, Sam found not only artistic growth but personal healing. He realized that acting was not about constructing illusion, but about revealing truth, the messy, uncertain, beautifully flawed truth of being human. The same principles began to shape how he lived off-screen. When he felt misunderstood, when projects fell through, when critics wrote unkind things, he reminded himself that life, like acting, was not meant to be perfect. Its pauses, its failures, its forgotten lines were all part of the performance. Years later, he would look back on that night by the hotel window, the cup of tea growing cold in his hand, and understand that disappointment was his teacher. The silence that had once terrified him had given him a new voice, a quieter, deeper one, rooted not in confidence but in authenticity. He began to see that mastery was not the absence of error, but the grace with which one recovered from it. The scene that once embarrassed him became, in time, the one that defined him, not because it was flawless, but because it was alive. Every hesitation, every imperfection, every breath carried the weight of real experience. And when audiences watched it, what they saw was not failure, but truth that he never again feared forgetting a line. He learned to welcome uncertainty, to meet it as an old companion. In the theater of life and art alike, he discovered perfection is sterile, but imperfection, if embraced with honesty, breathes. And so, through failure, through silence, through the humbling awareness of his own limits, Sam Heughan found what every true artist eventually must: that the most powerful performances are not the ones that conceal our humanity, but the ones that reveal it. There was a moment when Sam realized that even after years of acting, he could still fail. Right there, in front of everyone. The line slipped, silence filled the air, and for the first time he felt truly human. That night, back at his hotel, he stared out at the city lights, haunted by that mistake. But later, reading the director's note, "We need more fire, more faith," he understood. Perfection isn't what moves people. Truth does. In the days that followed, he stopped memorizing lines and started living them. He learned that it's not the flawless takes audiences remember. It's the cracks, the pauses, the humanity. And from that, he began to teach others, don't fear mistakes. Fear giving up before you try. Because every forgotten line, every broken moment,